We are back on Morning Line, our final segment this morning for former U.S. Congressman Bob Clement joining us. And it's so nice to be talking with you. I love these phone calls this morning, people that you and I both know. And again, this on the centennial tribute to his father and what's going to be happening over at the Clement Railroad Museum, which is just a wonderful place to visit in Dixon if you get a chance. And Congressman, it was interesting when you mentioned to me a moment ago again, and I think there's many people that maybe didn't know that it was 1969 when your father did tragically die in an automobile wreck. He was only 49 years old. What do you imagine, was there for him had he not died? What do you think he would have done, having been governor at such a young age? I mean, did he have aspirations for the national stage beyond that? What do you think?
Oh, I have no doubt about that. He had a blueprint like others do as well, but his life was cut short. But he was just a high-spirited racehorse, and he imagine being elected governor when you're 32 years of age, and to have the political courage and vision that he had. He spent the last 2 weeks of his life with me at Fort Gordon, Georgia, where he was a soldier during World War II and the Korean crisis. I put him on a plane, sent him to Nashville, and several days later was killed in an automobile accident. And just a major tragedy. Matter of fact, over 10,000 people were at his funeral in Dixon because people were touched so much in Tennessee.
Yeah, and you did talk about that in the documentary, that he actually put in the request because he knew you were there, I guess, on active duty, right? And so he was going out there. Was he part of the National Guard or service that he had to do? So he was able to spend, think about that, 2 weeks, of course, tragically he died, but you got to spend 2 weeks with him just before he passed.
That's correct, and that meant a lot to me that the last 2 weeks of his life I got to spend with him before that tragic accident on Franklin Road.
Now, of course, he was a huge role model to all of you, and I'm just wondering, from your perspective, kind of what you took from him. It seems like it's a kind of a two-sided coin here, and I think your brother Frank talked about it a bit in the documentary too, is that you really had a front row seat to some amazing, amazing things, getting to meet incredible people and go places. But at the same time, he was your father, but he also was, to some degree, obviously, in charge of the state. And so I don't know that, he was always necessarily there for you as much as you might have liked, but that you learned a lot. How did you take that away? Because I think Frank said it was a blessing, but at the same time, he would have liked to have had more time with his father.
Well, that's true with Frank because he was younger. Matter of fact, he's 6 years younger than I am. And so here I got to travel with Dad a lot, and Frank and Gary being so much younger during those years, it has an effect. But gosh, Mother and Dad were wonderful to all of us and gave us a start in life, and I'll never forget. And but we all have a purpose in life. It's not just because I'm in elected office. All of us go. My great grandmother in Scottsville, Kentucky, and father dies, and they come to a small town in Tennessee, Dixon, and at the Clement Museum, and start over again. But all of us can look back on life and think, if this hadn't happened or if that hadn't happened, where would we be today?
Just as we get near the end of the program here, I'm just curious if there's any story sometimes you've shared, maybe something that wasn't in the documentary, that you recall maybe as a child when you were traveling with your father, or you had opportunity to be with him around some, be it celebrities or other politicians, that are just little interesting anecdote or something like that where you observed him, maybe something you took away from that, maybe just from being by his side.
Nick, I've got 1,000 stories.
You'd say that.
With Dad, I was the fly on the wall, and I couldn't, I didn't say anything, but I would listen and observe. And I'll never forget when Colonel Tom Parker, who lived in Nashville, manager of Elvis Presley, And Colonel Tom Parker called Dad and says, Elvis is in town. And this is before Elvis is a superstar. And Dad said, bring him out to the governor's residence. And then Dad got on the phone with Droopy Edwards, warden at the state penitentiary. He said, bring the prisoners out here. And because he knew they were great singers as well. And they had a lot of time to practice and all. So Elvis comes to residence, just the family there upstairs. And Elvis is playing the piano, and the prisoners, all of them have 99-year sentences. The lead singer had 6 99-year sentences, wrote the song Just on the Range, Johnny Bragg. And they'd go back and forth. And Elvis got so carried away, it stayed till 3 o'clock in the morning. And after that, every time he'd come to Nashville, Elvis would call my father, Governor Clement, do you think I could go out to state penitentiary and spend some time with the prisoners? And I have no doubt he got the idea of Jailhouse Rock and some other songs by his exposure with the prisoners.
What a great story. And the documentary shows there's a great photo there of your father with Elvis in the middle and Colonel Tom Parker, and a really young Elvis. You can tell, like you said, this was initially just before he became the superstar that he was. And then there's pictures of him. Your father was friends with Minnie Pearl.
Oh matter of fact, Minnie and Eddie Arnold would come over the residence on a basis. Matter of fact, we got a great story. We were up in East Tennessee, and golly, huge crowd, and Eddie warmed the crowd up and entertained, and Dad tells this on himself. They're the best stories, telling it on yourself. But and here there were placards everywhere, Nick, Clement for governor and all that. And this lady comes up to Eddie Arnold after the speech and hugs him and all that. Oh, you're the greatest. And then Dad standing right there, because here Dad's running for governor, and touches her on the shoulder and said, well, what about me? She said, well, who are you? She came for the music. She didn't come.
That's awesome.
But Dad held himself, and because he thought it was a funny, great story.
That's great. And I'm sure, you've got enough material for another book. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. I want to remind folks again, the event is going to be this Sunday, correct? The documentary, which is so well done, and it's just fascinating. Anyone, I think, would enjoy watching it. And this is a clip of it we're showing right now. And again, the centennial tribute to your father and the awards that will be going out. Just want to remind folks of that. And, keep in mind, visit the Clement Railroad Museum, correct? And donations are welcome to help support that great place to visit there in Dixon.
Right, Nick, we need your help, and we operate on private funds and all that. And but I want to say to Demetria Kaladimos and Barb Kramer and Terry Dorsey, they helped produce this film and did a great job. And about a 50-minute film as well.
It's great. Well, Demetria, who was in TV News, does a production company, did a fantastic job. Anyway, it's fantastic seeing you, sir. We'll talk again, and you take care of yourself.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Channel 5. Y'all are great.
Pleasure. It's been a pleasure. I'll take a break, be back with a programming note right after this. Really good to see Bob Clement.